I just take it by the day, and then, sometimes a decision, if you don't have to make it because nothing changes, the landscape doesn't change, why would I put myself under pressure? The decision will come out automatically.
So after the US GP, it became evident that Haas needed to make a change in their roster. But apart from Mick Schumacher, who had and still has the biggest chance to remain their candidate for the 2023 seat, who could capitalize on his bad results, there are a couple of names that are circulating on the grid, and they're Nico Hulkenberg, Daniel Ricciardo and Antonio Giovinazzi. From these three, the loudest name is that of Hulkenberg, and this is why the US GP outcome for Mick is something that he could capitalize on very smartly. Now, Haas stopped the negotiations with Mick earlier this season, right around the Monaco GP, the second one where he committed a crash that was around $1 million in repairment cost.
Oh, it let go, hit the Armco, spun around a couple of times and then into the Tech Pro barrier.
So now there's a red flag to repair the barrier, it must be, Crofty.
Yeah, there
could
is.
be anything else.
This is something that the team can't afford to do anymore in the season, and that's been said by the team's owner, Gene Haas. According to him, this is affordable if you're Max Verstappen and you're winning races frequently, but if you're in a Haas, crashing the car with those repercussions is something that's not acceptable. We're just waiting. We need Mick to bring some points, and we're trying to give him as much time as possible to see what he can do. If he wants to stay with us, he's got to show us that he can score some more points. That's what we're waiting for, said Gene, who then continued to speak about Mick's crashes and his inconsistency throughout the 2022 season. In this sport, being kind of a rookie driver, the sport just doesn't allow it. It's just too expensive. If you make any mistakes in driver selection or strategy or tyre selection, it's costing you millions of dollars. I think Mick's got a lot of potential, but he costs a fortune, and he's wrecked a lot of cars that have cost us a lot of money that we just don't have. Now, if you bring us some points and you're Verstappen and you wreck the cars, we'll deal with it, but when you're in the back and you wreck cars, that's very difficult. If he wins the next one, he's in. Somewhere in between, there's a grey area. Now, this was Haas's statement prior to the US GP, and rest assured that he's sticking to it afterwards too. The fact that Mick finished well below the points table, while his teammate Magnussen was able to collect 4 valuable points for Haas in the fight for P8 in the Constructors' Championship, is something that is seriously hurting Mick's chances to remain in Haas. Earlier this week, Steiner spoke about Mick being the #1 choice for the team, saying that they always give the first chance to the guy they've worked out with, which was the case with Magnussen's comeback season. When talking about the German, Steiner said, "Absolutely, if you're working with somebody for 2 years, that's an advantage. The incumbent has always got the advantage. It's a home advantage. If you can have somebody you work with for 2 years, it's better than bringing somebody new in, because as I always said, you don't have the learning time. That's why we brought Kevin back as well, because he was here. He was out a year, but he knew everybody, and that's always an advantage when you start from somewhere." But what doesn't go in Mick's favour is the fact that Haas built a car that is capable of scoring points, and he managed to do that on 2 occasions only. True, P8 and P6 finishes are great for a backmarker team, especially after spending a whole season without a single point to their name. But back then, Haas wasn't competitive at all, and now with Magnussen, we're seeing that they can score points if the driver knows how to take care of the car. At the USA GP, Mick was involved in a small crash with Latifi that cost him some places and damage to his car. This was one of the reasons why he had a bad time climbing on the grid, especially after a safety car deployment saw him completing a free pit stop and being in the fight for points. But Mick's tenure in F1 is under a huge threat, and what's even worse for him is that the team is considering a replacement for him, a driver that is more than eager to prove himself yet again in the sport. Nico Hulkenberg is a driver that can take the team in the right direction, and although he and Magnussen did have some interesting history between them, that is well in the past and they're going to be great teammates. Nico is currently a reserve driver for Aston Martin, and the fact that he was able to match Stroll's pace and even outqualify him once in the first 2 races that he substituted for Vettel is something that shows massive potential that he still has it in himself. Steiner also has a very good opinion of the German driver, saying that Haas needs a driver that is exactly like Nico in order to score good results and to bring the team on the right path. When talking about the German, Steiner said, "I spoke to Hulkenberg. I've known Nico for a long time, better than I know Daniel. We're talking, but nothing has been done yet. Our list includes drivers who have super license, and we're looking at them all. Nico is one of them." Hulkenberg is a driver that's never managed to get on the podium in his rich F1 career, and that's something that could decide whether or not Haas will sign him. For example, they do have the option to offer Ricciardo a deal for 2023, Although the Aussie isn't really interested in this engagement, but having an 8-time race winner is a much better option than having a driver that's reached P4 as the top finish in his career. Although Ricciardo has expressed his thoughts of the future and the 2023 season, which doesn't include Haas, Steiner hopes that Ricciardo will change his mind and express his interest in the American team. If he doesn't, then Hulkenberg will likely be the replacement for Mick. But for Mick to be replaced, he needs to perform poorly in the next 3 races. However, some records say that he's only 1 race left to prove himself, and that is the Mexico GP. This is something that Steiner said too, as he added that the team would not make a decision between the USA GP and the Mexico one. I'm honest, it's still 50-50. We will not make a decision between Austin and Mexico simply because there's not time. The next time would be after Mexico because we would have more time to deal with it. As an athlete, you're always under pressure. He knows he has to perform. We're talking about it openly. Pressure isn't a bad thing because with pressure you also get an opportunity, and I think he can handle it well. We returned from Japan on the same plane and he was in a pretty good mood. He grew up in a racing family and knows what it's about. It's part of his job. With that being said, Hulkenberg could be very happy with how things are turning out recently. Although it would be a shame to not see Mick in F1, mostly because Williams have signed Logan Sargent for the next season, it's how things stand as of now. The German hasn't been able to impress Haas in the previous season, and it's likely that he'll get dropped from Ferrari's Academy too, meaning that his chances of completing a comeback in F1 anytime soon would be impossible. What Mick has to do now is to perform on the best possible level and prove that he still has it in himself. Although many experts said that Mick isn't like his father and he needs time to accommodate to new environments, it seems like Haas doesn't have time to waste nor to spare, as they want to get a driver that can score points instantly and bring the team to a better place. And who could blame them? They spent 2 entire seasons at the rock bottom, and now that they finally have a car that can perform and score points, they don't have time for patience. Mick had 1 year to adapt to the Haas car, and although the technical regulations were a huge challenge for most of the drivers to adapt to, it's not something that Mick can use as an excuse when it comes to his poor performance. So, what do you think about Mick's future and Hulkenberg's arrangement with Haas? Let us know in the comments below.